Hello and welcome to Code Over Time. My name is Kev, and in this video we are going to kickstart your onboarding process. So at this point you should have Varcade Games already set up on your local environment. If you don't, I've got a couple of videos that will walk you through that process, whether you're on Windows or Linux or OS X. So I'll link the video somewhere here. There'll be links in the description. But basically you want to get the project set up so that you can follow along with this video and the videos that will follow. So onboarding is the process that you go through when you start a new job, hopefully any job. But as a software engineer, there's a whole process that you need to follow to get up to speed on a project, to start getting into the code and start actually doing some work. Now, this onboarding process may be refined in some places that you work and maybe non-existent in other places that you work. But one of the things that you need to get good at is jumping into a new project, getting a feel for the project, and then eventually building an understanding of the code base. So that's what this video is all about. We're going to kickstart that, and then there'll be a series of videos that follow, and we'll go through all various different topics, and we'll kind of just go deeper and deeper into Varcade Games and understand all of the technical nitty-gritty details. So there's a couple of ways we can approach onboarding and learning a project and understanding, what's going on in the project and what's going on in the code. You can think about it in two ways. You can start at the front and you can start using the product and start understanding the product and work your way back, or you can start in the back and just jump into the code and then work your way out. I much prefer the first option because it's a good idea to really understand the product that you're working on. You're going to be working as part of a team, and not just with other software engineers. You're going to be working with product owners, project managers, maybe artists, UI designers, UX designers, QA. So having a mutual understanding of the product will really help you communicate with all of the other people on your team. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start digging into the project by trying to reverse engineer it a little bit. So we're going to use Varcade Games and then just start to kind of scratch beneath the surface and get an understanding of what's going on from the point of view of an outsider. Let's imagine we actually don't even have access to the code and see what we can learn about the project before we even look at what's going on behind the scenes. Before we do that, I want to talk quickly about this onboarding section in the wiki. I will link this in the description, but it's very much worth your time just going to this page and spending 5 minutes reading it. It will cover some of the tech that we'll be going through. This project is built primarily with JavaScript, Python, there's HTML, CSS, and in terms of kind of tech stacks, there's Vue.js, Django, Node.js, Flask, Docker. If these names don't mean anything to you, it doesn't matter. If they do, then great. We'll kind of learn as we go. And then in terms of learning outcomes, we want to get to a point where we're comfortable running a set of microservices using Docker. We want to actually set up an efficient developer workflow so that we can work on the project in an efficient way. We will be running a web application, we'll be running application servers, and we'll be running a multiplayer game with WebSockets. Now, when it comes to software engineering and interviewing, there's a lot of videos and a lot of content online about how to, prepare for interviews and all that sort of stuff. I've interviewed a lot of people over the years. I've built a lot of teams over the years, and I've always found that the people that come in and they know what they're talking about are the people that tend to advance further. So by actually jumping in and using this technology, we don't want to prepare for an interview by practicing interviews. Now, you can practice some algorithmic stuff and data structure stuff, and that's great. But if you can go into an interview and talk confidently about how you've used Docker and the ways you've used Vue.js and some of the problems you might face when using a WebSocket, that's going to be much more impressive to me as an interviewer, that you have this actual experience with some real world technology. So before we dig into all that, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. How to approach this course, again, in this wiki page. There's a strength coach that I work with called Dan John, and he says this thing: throwers throw, jumpers jump, sprinters sprint, runners run, and hurdlers hurdle. And the idea is simple. If you want to get better at running, then you need to run. If you want to get better at jumping, then you need to jump. And for me, the same is true of software engineering, in that software engineers need to engineer. That's how you get better at software engineering, is by doing it. It's interesting. I kind of compare software engineering to sport, which seems like an odd comparison, but if you think about a game like football, you could sit down for 5 years, read every book about football, watch every football game on TV. You could study it down to the absolute minute details. But after that 5 years, you're not really going to be able to go out on a pitch and play, right? You might know everything about the game, all the rules, the ins and outs. You might be able to talk about every player, and again, you've read all of the books about tactics and strategy and all that great stuff. It's not making you a better player. You actually need to get out and play. And I think the same is true of software engineering. And the way we want to approach this is little and often over the long haul. If you jump into this project for 30 minutes every day, you will be far better off than jumping in for 4 hours once a week. Okay, now you need to make the best of whatever time you have, and that's going to vary from person to person, but consistent and often, even if you're just jumping in for 15 minutes, it's worth doing. Just build up that consistent habit, and I think that's where you'll see the most gains. Secondly is give yourself time. It can take a long time to kind of learn and understand what's going on in a software project, so don't be too hard on yourself if you're finding it's taking a long time to find your feet. RTFM is read the effing manual, which is something you might hear software engineers say. And basically, before asking questions, think about reading the documentation. There's some technology here like Django and Vue.js and Redis that they have great documentation. So if you're curious, go read the docs. Go figure out what this software actually is by going directly to the source, right? The other thing is, I think it's a good idea to set some goals. Like, so what do you want to be able to do? Do you want to be able to build a game? Do you want to be able to build a website? And that will help orient you around what you actually are trying to get out of this. You know, maybe you're really interested in performance and you want to test a system and push it to its limits. Well, you might take a slightly different path than someone who wants to build a website and is really interested in front end and graphics and presentation and all of that sort of thing. So it's useful to have some sort of goal of where do you want to be. I think the onboarding process over the next few videos will be the same for everyone, but there will be a point where maybe you'll kind of branch off and go in a specific direction. And the last couple of things is there will be points where you're feeling frustrated and annoyed and angry and things just aren't clicking and nothing's working and you're going to want to put your head through a wall. This is totally normal. I still get this after 20 years of coding. But the other thing that happens is there will be moments of joy and accomplishment and satisfaction and happiness. And those moments don't go away either, right? When you figure something out, when you complete something, when you finally solve a bug that's been bothering you, those moments keep coming, just like the moments of frustration keep coming. It's all just part of the journey. So try and embrace it and try and have fun. It's only code. We're just building software. That's, all we're trying to do here. So that's enough talking. I think you should go read this page. Like I said, there'll be a link in the description. But for now, let's actually jump in and let's start kind of reverse engineering the Varcade Games a little bit to see what we can learn. So I've got this website. I've got it set up. I've added a whole bunch of sample games here. All of these assets are available if you go to the open up the code, and if you go to the website, again, you should have your own fork of the repo at this point. And in sample assets of the website, you'll see there's all of these images, which this is our heavy Metal Gear Solid. A whole bunch of images in there that you can use to populate the site so that when you open it up, it actually looks nice, right? And it's kind of nice to play around with. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to just spend some time and kind of get a sense of what's going on here, right? I've got this, the logo at the top, that's a link. Okay, you'll kind of notice in most websites that it's good practice to have the logo at the top of the page be a link to link back to your main page. So if I hit play game here and then click the link, it'll bring me back to the home page. So that's something we have there. I'm logged in, but I have an option here to log out. So we can try doing that. Maybe we can create a new account. And if I hit get started, what happens? Well, it just brings me to the account creation. So what happens if I do some stuff like have a name with spaces and let's set my password to just the word password. And if I register now, what happens? The password is too common, so we know we've got a bit of validation there. What happens if I take the @ out of my email address? Now the button doesn't even let me register. Okay, so that's good. It's at least trying to prevent me from using a bad email address. So if I have password as my password and do password 123 and register now, password is still too common. But if I do PA88W0 or D, which is kind of replacing some of the letters of passwords with numbers, and register now. Okay, now I'm in. It allowed that. So again, we're just exploring. We're getting a sense of how the website actually works. We know there's some validation on login. When we go back to the code, we can expect to find that there is some code there for doing this validation. On the main page, the next thing we can do is we can start digging into the structure a little bit. So if you right click, if you've never used these browser tools before, you can right click anywhere and there'll be an inspect option. Now I'm using Firefox. This should be here in Chrome as well. I think it's called inspect in Chrome. And what this will do is open up this little window at the bottom. Now this is interesting. We can actually get a sense of the structure of the actual web page in here. Now why is this useful? Well, it allows us to actually explore, while we're developing, and change things while we're developing on the fly. So for example, let's say this logout button here. I've got this button over here that allows me to select individual elements on the page. Okay. So if I select the logout button, you'll notice over here that there's a bit of CSS, and we can see there's the color. And if I click the color, well, I can actually modify it now. Maybe I prefer green for my link. Okay. So I can change that there. And now my link is green. So here's something for you to try on your own local Varcade Games. Try and change the color of the Varcade Games logo up in the top left-hand corner here. See if you can figure out, using this, you should be able to select it and change the color. It's got a color, it's got a glow. So that's a little something you can try right now, is just jump in and try changing that. So when I'm actually doing UI work, I'll often spend most of my time here in the actual tools, just playing with things. So for example, here's a card image bit of CSS, and I've got the min width set to 400, but if I set to 200, well, what happens, right? Well, that's not ideal. And let's say width and height 100%. What if I start to change this number a little bit? Well, that's not doing anything. Why is that not doing anything? Well, if I go the other way, it is. Okay, you'll see that's kind of changing how the image is actually rendered. So you can come in and start playing with these numbers, right? Here we've got some the actual border radius. So you can see these images are actually a little bit curved. So if I change this to, let's say, 0.5, what happens? Well, the curve actually just got a little bit bigger. So if I do bottom left, now the curve has gotten a little bit bigger on these images. What if I just turn this off? If I uncheck this, we can see there's actually multiple styles here that are affecting the image. Now that I've unchecked all of these, you can see our images here have all reverted to, maybe I can zoom in here a little bit, they've all reverted to angled corners. So we can just play around and say, well, do I like that? Do I think that looks better? And I can re-enable them here. Okay, now they're round again. Do I like that? How do I feel about the way that looks? And notice that I've got a much bigger curve on the bottom than I do on the top. So if I like how that looks, well, I can modify this CSS here. Change that to 0.5. And now we've got a much bigger curve. And we can just play around with the styles and see, do I like how that looks? And if I do like how it looks, I can actually later on go change the CSS. Because if I refresh this page, all of these changes are lost. So let's just do a quick refresh. And you'll notice my logout button is red again, and my images have gone back to the angled corner that they had before. So the point is, you can start going in and playing with the look and feel of the website just by getting in here and changing some of the values. You can even change the HTML. So what if I want to change the name of the site to Kev's Varcade Games? Well, now the logo has updated at the top. Okay. I can also, if I want, right click and delete that node. And now we don't have any logo at all. Again, we just need to refresh the page. I'm using Control-R to refresh the page. That would be Command-R on OS X. So you can see we can kind of just manipulate and play with the page here. But this isn't helping us too much with reverse engineering, right? This is letting us know kind of how the page is structured. You can see we've got this idea of a root container. We've got a game list here, just going by the classes. If I open this up, you can see a div with active games is the ID. So this is obviously this list. And as I open this up here, we can see we've got the heading, and then we've actually got our data. And here we can actually start to get a sense of what our project is built with. We've got these classes, flicking-viewport. So if I copy that, right, and open a new tab and paste that in, I've just discovered something. This is a library called Flicking, and you can see it's got some panels here. So what have I just learned? Well, I've just learned that these movable panels here are implemented using this library called Flicking, right? So we're learning, we're just kind of picking up bits of information about how the website is built. So when I go to the actual code now, I can expect that this library is going to be referenced somewhere in there. So you can just dig around the HTML, you can play around. If you don't like this active games list here, you can delete that node. Now we no longer have active games. All right. And that's kind of it for HTML and CSS. Like I said, dig in and play around. See if you can change the color of this to green, both the text and the glow. See if you can change that color. And I think that's just kind of a nice little task for you to do. Make some other changes to the website. If there's anything you don't like about this UI design, maybe you can go and change it. In fact, here's another challenge for you. We have in every one of these games, when you click it, you can see, and you'll remember from the admin panel earlier on, we uploaded a picture and we uploaded a banner for each one. And if I go to the admin, okay, and let's say I go to zombie ants from space, you can see that this image here for the banner is images/zombie_ants_banner. All right, so let's play around with some stuff. So let's click this, and if I right click that image and press inspect, because I selected that image specifically, it's going to go to where this image is set. Now we have a link here to the actual image that we uploaded earlier to the admin panel. Now our zombie image is called zombie_ants_banner. So what happens if we change this URL? We just changed the background by modifying the HTML there. And in fact, interestingly enough, there is a scam that some hackers do where they'll ring someone up and they'll try and get remote access to their computer, and they'll get the user to open up their bank account on the page. And what the hacker will then do is modify the source of the page to make it look like they've added a bunch of money, and they'll do this to just kind of fool the person into doing some stuff. There's a guy on YouTube that makes great videos where he exposes these guys. But that's one way they actually do things like that. You can go in and you manipulate the website like this. Now, it's not actually changing anything. It's just changing how the thing is rendered on your computer here. But it's just worth knowing that that is something that can be done. Again, we do a refresh. Our BRPG goes back to normal. So here's another piece of homework for you. 2 things. And again, I'll write these in the description. I would like you to change the Varcade Games logo to green. And also, this featured image here. Right, we've got a big image from our rock, paper, scissors apocalypse. See if you can change that big image to one of the other images, maybe the Battle Grannies image or the Heavy Metal Gear Solid. They all have banner images, and remember, you can go into the admin and you can select any game you want, and you can see here's a link. So that's the URL for the image that you uploaded already. And let's see, can you modify this image here to be one of the other feature images? And that's just going to be a little challenge for you to do, to actually get in and get your hands dirty with the HTML. But I don't want to stop there. I want to dig a little bit deeper, and to do that, we're going to inspect again, and we're going to go to our network tab. Now, the network tab is interesting because when you load a page, the browser is going to make lots of requests to the server. So every image here, for example, is downloaded from the server. It also needs to download a list of games from the server that it can render here. So on this tab, or after I inspect and I open network, I'm going to do Control-Shift-Refresh. Now, Control-Shift-Refresh in your browser, what that will do is reload the page, but it won't reload things from the cache. Okay, so we'll get kind of a fresh view of everything. Now, if I open up here, from top to bottom, we can see the list of requests that were performed. So the first request was fetching a HTML document, and this is, you can see from looking at our HTML, this should be familiar. This was loading the kind of base website. So the first request was loading the basic kind of HTML. Then it loaded something called app.js, which is the JavaScript that actually allows the rest of the page to load. It loads some other stuff. The fav icon, which is the thing that goes in the tab, is then loaded. This thing called drive through. So this is the font, which you should recognize from the logo at the top. And then next there's a call to games, which is some more HTML. And then we have this call to an API.varcade games.local to /games /v1/games. Now, over here you can select between raw or not raw. And what we can see here is some JSON. And JSON is just a structured way to store data. Hopefully you're familiar with JSON already. And you can see here that all of the stuff listed here corresponds pretty much exactly to all of the stuff that is listed here. And that's because this request to api.varcade.local :8000 /games /v1/games will return a list of all of our games. And this is how this page actually gets populated. So the base page will load, and then it sends a request to get all of the games, and that data is returned in JSON. So you can do this for any website as well. You can get a sense of like, what's the request that's being sent? This is the full URL. And then you can get a look at the response and see what's actually the data being returned. Okay, and we can see here our game state and game type. Our game state is active here. The game state is, our game type is single player only. You can start to infer some of this stuff. And again, we're just trying to learn and trying to figure out what should we expect to find in the code once we do dig into the code. So single player games, right? BRPG is a single player game. So if I can find BRPG here, we can guess by the ID. BRPG, yep, this one is the one I had open. And SPO we know is single player only. What about a multiplayer game? So we know 3D Pool is a multiplayer game. So if I open that one up, we can see MPO. So that's multiplayer only, right? And we can, like I said, infer this stuff. And when we go looking through the code, we can expect to see these characters, or this word ACT for active, right? If we scroll down to the bottom to shooty shooty bang bang, we can see this one is CMS, which we can actually infer is coming soon, right? So again, reverse engineering, we're just kind of digging in, we're understanding how the website is working, and we are kind of setting ourselves up for what to expect to see when we're on the back end, right? When we actually get into the code and we start looking at how the code works, we're not going in blind. We now know kind of what to expect. We know that the page is loaded. We know there's a request to this endpoint. We know that comes back and there's a whole bunch of images are then loaded. So obviously we load the page then loads the games, and then for each game it has to load the image, which you can see here. These are the images all being loaded. You can see the type here: PNG, JPEG, JPEG, and so on. So we can actually go through the logical order of how the page is being loaded at this point. And I think that's all I want to cover in this video, to be honest. We're going to come back to this console later, these tools later. You're going to be using them a lot, to be honest, when you get into actually doing some UI work and stuff like that. But that is it for now. So like I said, 2 bits of homework or a challenge for you. Change the color of this header to green. Change this background to be one of the banner images from one of the other games. Pick another game and select that banner image and replace this big featured image, and see how you get on. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section, or you can go join us at the Discord if you need any help, or again, if you just need any clarification on anything that we covered today. But yeah, that is it for today. Best of luck. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.